Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for May 13th, 2024. Welcome to all who are watching and to our friends in the audience tonight. We're going to get started this evening with item number 1, audience communications, and I do not have any blue slips, so we're going to go ahead and move on to item 2, which is the Committee of the Whole, and this evening we're going to get a district update from Mrs. Oquist. Good evening.
Well, thank you so much, President Bradford and Board of Education. I am going to, I don't know if Emily, if you're able to loop in Bill and Phil in the camera with me, but we are going to share just a few key district updates with you. So we have, as you know, quite a bit going on, and every month I share an update with you, but this is some timely information that we thought would be of interest to the community and some highlights that we wanted to share. So the first is we get many, many questions each week about the Early Childhood Center. And while we talk about it often during our study sessions, we just wanted to give you a couple of quick updates and also let the community know some exciting news. So ECC is on target for the timeline that we had established to be turned over to the district by June, no later than June 30th, possibly before that time. We are moving right along with the construction, with the interior finishes, and the exterior landscaping will begin soon. We will have furniture delivery in mid-June. And many, many folks in the community who, of course, supported the bond and support Livonia Public Schools, even if they don't have children in school, have said, will we ever get a chance to see the Early Childhood Center? So we want to say publicly, yes, absolutely. This is thanks to our community that we have this beautiful new school for our youngest learners. So we are planning to have a community open house. I'm going to solidify the date with the board, but it will be in mid-July, in all likelihood the week of July 15th. And we are very excited about that possibility. We think that the opportunity for folks who live here to be able to come in and see where our students will be next year, to be thinking about their own children, future children, grandchildren, we think that would be a wonderful opportunity. It's certainly something that we have heard a lot of interest expressed in that, and I know you have received that feedback as well. So at this point, we are planning for a morning session, maybe about an hour. It would literally be an open house, meaning folks can come and go, but members of our team, and if there are members of the board who are available, we will be stationed in various spots along the way to be able to highlight what would be going on in those areas. We'll have members of our bond team there as well, and really both a welcome and a thank you for our community. So we'll do one session in the morning and then one session in the early evening. That doesn't mean that's the only time we will do that, but we wanted to be sure that before we got everyone completely moved in, that we had an opportunity to bring the community through and show them this beautiful new school for our students. So again, everything is moving along well on the timeline. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Mr. Francis, that may be helpful?
No, just a matter of, the details will come out with regard to the community open house, and it's not going to be a hard and fast starting a tour at a certain time and then leading a group or a pack through the building. It is going to be more of truly of an open house. We'll have some of the classrooms open, like Mrs. Oquist said. We'll have some of our folks throughout the building. So if you live nearby and you've been watching it go up, and I know that's something I would totally do. I love
Yeah.
checking out new building or something that's going on, new house in the neighborhood. So if you want to do that, you can come through, and when we get the information out, you can come and see it and see where your tax dollars have gone to. We're very excited. It's a lot of buzz around the ECC.
And we will also be having an official ribbon cutting closer to the first day of school. So the center will officially open on August 26th for students. And so as we get closer to that date, we'll of course work with our Board of Education and members of our bond team and our partners there to be able to set an official ribbon cutting date as well. So a couple highlights from last week. We had the opportunity to welcome Governor Whitmer to Livonia Public Schools. She wanted the opportunity to visit and tour the Livonia Career Technical Center. So as you know, we have had programming at LCTC for over 45 years. Career technical education has been part of the fabric of LPS for decades now. And I have to say that the staff, the leadership, of the program, our secondary director and our team here have really catapulted our work there to a new level. In addition to the bond updates, we now have embarked, thanks to the Board of Education's approval, on an early middle college partnership. And we have already gotten a tremendous response from our incoming ninth graders. As you remember, that is a decision they have to make at that time. We have interest from students at each one of our high schools, even more than we had anticipated.
great.
And so parents are excited about it, kids are excited about it, and so of course that partnership is with criminal justice. But all of our programs there have an articulation agreement with Schoolcraft College. And so we were really able to highlight, we had Dr. Glenn Searney there, Senator Polhanke, a member of the Angela Power from the Skillman Foundation. And so we were all able to go on the tour and see, in that particular visit, the sports med department. We were able to see auto tech. We were able to see the new robotics center, both the competition field and the middle school area. And then, of course, we ended up in construction trades with all of you, as you were there to help us greet the governor and hear about her support for CTE and making that connection to community college and how we can make that as accessible as possible for our students. It was wonderful to have one of our students speak to the need for that support, and also one of our parents who has an LCTC graduate currently attending Schoolcraft and a current LCTC student, and spoke to that partnership and the articulation of students walking into Schoolcraft with credits to begin either from dual enrollment or from the agreements through the programming at LCTC and on to Schoolcraft. So it was a great opportunity to highlight LCTC and Livonia Public Schools. We were very proud, again, to welcome Governor Whitmer for the tour. Anything you want to highlight on that?
I do, and I'm just gonna, I just want to say, so at one point, I was an administrator at Livonia Career Technical Center. The secondary director, Kevin E2, he was a teacher in that building. We've always known that it's an amazing place that does incredible work with students, our juniors and our seniors that are in all three high schools. We are so fortunate, and I still don't think that the families across the district, those who particularly don't have any connection to it, that haven't attended it themselves perhaps, or had a child go there, understands not only the power of career technical education, but specifically the Livonia Career Technical Center is a gem for this district. There are other districts that have career centers, and they are all doing great work. And Oakland County does it on a county basis. The fact that we have such a thriving, long-standing career center available for our students it's just off the charts. And again, I don't know that everybody recognizes that, and the fact that the governor recognized it, or folks on her staff said, we need to go there. That's a place that we need to go visit. And they came here and celebrated it. It's just hard to explain how proud that I feel, and I know that Kevin feels, and I know that the principal, Lindsay Gray, feels, and the whole staff. I just want to kind of shout it at a mountaintop. There's not a lot of mountains in Livonia or anywhere around here, but it is a phenomenal opportunity for students. And I'm glad that we have that type of focus of people saying, hold on, what's going on there? We need to check that out.
Yeah, it really was fantastic. We were able to share with the group that gathered that we have a record number of requests for students to attend LCTC, over 1,100 requests for next year.
Wow.
And as you know from the highlights that Mrs. Gray and her team shared, over 80% of the programs now are a certificated program where students leave with the credentials to move right into the workplace, either in move forward in that direction or move into the workplace while they're also gaining a college education. Yes, Mrs. Burton.
If members of our public would like to see the Careers Tech Center, how would they go about doing that?
I think one of the best times, there's a couple times a year where we actually have an open house. So there is an open house that takes place in February, is that correct? And then we also have one in the fall. And so those are widely published. Those would probably be the best times to visit and to be able to see the programming. I know Mrs. Gray has given many, many tours this year, not only for our business partners within our community, but from other CTE programs across the region, not even just in Wayne County. And she has just done a remarkable job in her first year there as principal. So we were very proud to have that visit and that tour. And thank you so much to our Board of Education for being there to support our staff and our students. That meant a lot. And we also had a visit from Wayne County RESA. So members of the Wayne County RESA Board, Dr. Colbert, the superintendent, and 3 of their assistant superintendents asked to come out and visit Jackson Early Childhood Center to see the special education programming that starts at age really 0 for our early on program all the way up through age 5. So they were able to visit an early on program, Talk It Up, ECP, and they were extraordinarily impressed. And I have a letter from the Board of Education and from the superintendent to share with all of you with their thanks and appreciation. They were truly wowed by the variety of programming, the depth of the services offered here. And as you know, all of those programs, with the exception of Young Fives, will be moving over to our new ECC. So it was great to have RESA also recognize that there are outstanding things happening here and want to come out and visit. So we wanted to be sure that not only you knew that, but our community knew that and could be proud. So from one end of the spectrum for our learners all the way to the other end, it's been a great week of highlighting our programming. And to wrap us up, I'd like Mr. Green to just give you and the community an update. I know I shared with you on Friday an update about Young Fives. He's going to update that and share the locations with our community, as well as a little bit about the programming as we head into next year.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you,
evening.
Superintendent Oquest. I really do appreciate the fact that I'm able to update you monthly in our study sessions on all things early childhood. And this year, Young Fives, as you recall, we started looking at our Young Fives programming back in November, and we had a couple different factors of the why in that. One was they were not going to be heading over to the Early Childhood Center. There was really a shift in the thinking across the state to have Young Fives be more of an elementary mindset. So that being said, we have started a task force, and since that time, over the many months, we have developed a concept of a full-day program. And as we've talked about for months, we thought deeply about that, did some research. We've had a curriculum cohort work on curriculum pieces, which we'll be updating you on next month, and a logistics team that's been working on all the behind the scenes as far as looking at possible locations, how those locations could be sustainable year over year, discerning interest from the community, and we opened up registration on March 1st. We closed it on April 26th, and we had 120 interested families in Young Fives Kindergarten, which allowed us to open up 6 sites for next year. And those sites were determined based on where there was, again, sustainability for space year over year. We don't want to have a situation where we're moving sites on an annual basis. And so those sites, were very excited. Last week we announced those sites as Hoover, Rosedale, Hayes, Buchanan, Roosevelt, and Coolidge Elementary Schools. And so my fantastic assistant, Mrs. Herbeck, in the second floor, with help from teams of people last Friday, were able to get every single letter out to the families. Our logistics team, which is really Superintendent Oquist, Mrs. Keats, and Mr. Grizak, who spent days geocoding every address to make sure we could get them the right spot if it wasn't their home school. Received notification letters. We've already received positive feedback today that they've received those letters. And so that really takes us to our next step, which is going to be the planning for our Young Fives Kindergarten Roundup, which will either take place on May 29th or 30th. I just had a meeting this afternoon with all the site schools, and we started the planning for that, and those are going to be regular meetings, and they're going to reach out to those families with their own correspondence sometime this week, because they will have the letters, and we'll go from there. For those families in the community that are maybe listening in that are on the wait list, we will start having a process where we will address the wait list. We're going to let this week settle And then by next week, we're going to see if there's space on the wait list where we can place some additional families, because we'd really like them to get to their Young Fives kindergarten roundup location for that first, welcome to the new community. So it's all very exciting. It's all very positive. There's a lot of work still to do. But we're really excited of all the progress that we made, and everybody. I haven't spoken to anybody at the building level or on the parent feedback that isn't excited for this shift. We're honoring our past traditions that we've had in Young Fives and expanding it. So it's all very exciting.
So thank you, President Bradford. Those are just a few updates. As you know, there's always a lot going on, but we thought this would be a good evening to be able to highlight that for the board and then also for our community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is wonderful news. We love to hear all about the exciting things happening throughout the district, and there are some great things happening. So with that, we will go ahead and move on to item number 3, which is building and site. And Mrs. Burton, you are up this evening.
Thank you.
Yep.
The first item on our agenda this evening is item 3A, which is the quarterly dashboard, Q1 2024, from the 2021 bond. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Weber and Mr. Francis.
It is that time of the year again, and I know everybody around this table and those who watch at home get very excited for the 4 times a year that we do the quarterly dashboard. But kidding aside, it is an important update and review for the board and for our community, because this is, it's a huge project that we're doing, and I call it one project, even though it's all these multiple projects. And the dollars that have come through the 2021 bond initiative have done amazing things. I was walking through Rosedale today, and Rosedale was done last summer, in the summer of 24. 2024. 23.
23.
Yes,
We're not there yet.
No, boy, oh boy. But it looks so nice, and they've done, as a building and as a school community, they've enhanced all the things that we did with these bond dollars, and have their logos in places and great artwork out, and it's just, the building looks phenomenal, and it's fun to walk through those spaces and see the fruits of what the community has supported. So with that, I will turn that over to Mr. Weber, as he generally does, and we'll run through. And if you have a question while he's in the midst, feel free to stop him, or if you want to wait to the end, that's fine too.
Alrighty. Thank you, Mr. Francis. Oh yeah, as Phyllis mentioned, it's a good snapshot quarterly, understanding that this is a big program, a lot of dollars flowing. So this is kind of a picture of how we have our controls and our budgets, and how we work closely with Mrs. Smith's staff and in the finance department, and understanding that we're staying within our means, our scope, our budgets, and then displays it to the community. And just a reminder, this does get posted to the Livonia Public Schools website if anybody would like access to it at a later date. So we'll start at the top left, our bond program goals and objectives. This is just to remind us and show everybody what we were aiming towards during the bond marketing campaign, maintaining that we stick to that scope and those budgets and the goals that we try to achieve in this program. I'll move over to the right for our cost summary. Once again, this is kind of a snapshot of a program we use called eBuilder, that we track all our budgets, we track incoming invoices, pay-ups, anything that's processed is under one large software program. We work with the finance department to make sure everything's reconciled on a monthly basis, and keep working forward to make sure that we're managing all dollars. So with that said, I'll give a brief explanation of each one of the columns, just as a clarification for everyone. I'll touch a few numbers and then ask questions as needed. So starting with column A, our projected budget, that's just our pocket of money for each one of the categories, working down the matrix. Column B would be the current contracts and purchase orders. These are any documents that have been signed or executed to our vendors and contractors, signed and out the door. Actuals paid are dollars that have been spent against those signed contracts and purchase orders. That's column C. Column D would then be just the remaining dollars on those executed contracts and purchase orders. Column E is our forecasted contracts and purchase orders. So these are ones that we're looking forward to for summers of 25 and 26, or anything that has not been completed yet in 24. We forecast those dollars out, working with multiple folks in the LPS's department to make sure that we have dollars allocated. Column F would be the unallocated reserve, so we call this our owner's contingency. This is essentially a fund of money to make sure if anything does come up, we do have a safety net to use those dollars accordingly if there's any surprises along the way. And then column G is our forecasted over-under. We're just showing 0, everything ties out, which is good news. The true 186, and a little bit of a footnote here to the good news that I'll share is that the bond program originally started at $186 million. There has been over $4 million of earned interest, which is great news for the district. That's just interest being earned while the money's sitting in the bank, to add on to that $186 million.
Excellent.
Does anyone have questions from that table before I move along?
Questions or comments from anybody? All righty.
Alrighty. Move down to the cash flow finances. This essentially shows dollars in, dollars out to make sure that we are whole. So to date, if you add Series 1 from 2021 and then Series 2 from 2023 moving across, the construction proceeds, we've received $147, almost $148 million to date. Working down, there's that $4.8 million in earned interest, so we're almost at $5 million. Totaling the 152, subtract the $104 million that is actuals paid to date, and we're sitting with approximately $48 million in the account right now for the bond program to pay forthcoming pay-ups and invoices.
Okay. Questions or comments? Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Brian, when is the Series 3 set to go out?
We're forecasting for the spring of '25.
Spring of '25?
Yeah, that is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Once again, we've worked with Ms. Smith, also PFM is the financial advisor for the district. That we actually have another meeting set up in the next few weeks to keep working with them to understand. They can tell us and help with market values and property values of timing and when the right time is for the district to sell that last series.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Opus?
Mr. Francis, would you share, just for the community's sake, the schools that are on tap for this summer?
Summer of '25, we have Hoover, Hayes, and Roosevelt are our K4s that are on there.
24.
I'm sorry.
You said
Good.
25.
We'll start again.
Yes.
For this summer?
Yes.
Which schools are,
I had the right
which schools are we
schools, I
working
just don't
this
know what year
summer?
I'm living in. Those are the correct schools that are happening this summer. I'm gonna call it this summer. It is Hoover, Hayes, and Roosevelt are the 3 K4s. We have Holmes Middle School, we have Stevenson High School, all under construction. In fact, all 5 of those are under construction right now. The LMCs have been taken over. Some of the kitchens, if not all of the kitchens, have been taken over. All but
Not Roosevelt yet.
Not Roosevelt. So we are already working in those spaces.
Yeah, there's, we were, what, about 4 weeks ahead, would you say, on the media centers turning them over?
That is correct. Yes, we started a little bit earlier this year with the hope of trying to wrap up a little bit cleaner in the fall semester to avoid disturbance in the fall. So we'd made the decision to start a little bit earlier this year so
The buildings have been great about, working with that, finding alternative spaces, et cetera. For the media specialists or at the K4, they're generally pushing into the classrooms for their special, et cetera. So it's been very helpful though, because walking through those LMCs, they've already been demoed and they're working on putting in new items into them. So we knew that last summer we had a shortened summer. This year we know we're starting earlier in August, so we started a little bit earlier.
And for the benefit of the public who may not have been following along, can you give just a brief summary of what the updates are for the high school LMCs? Because there's some fundamental differences that we're looking at in really updating those and bringing those into a current media center.
Well, all library media centers will be getting renovated, and there are many things. Most items tie through all of them. High school is a little bit different. They're so large and utilized a little differently. So all of the LMCs are having what we call flexible classroom space. That's with that glass nano wall, which is the manufactured name of it, but it's basically an opening accordion wall that's made of glass. All of the K8s have an idea factory, which is our Project Lead the Way space, or STEM and STEAM as others call them, or maker spaces as many know them by. And just generally redoing all of the space on the interiors to have a focus on student grouping as far as if they want to break out into small groups, a little bit more flexibility, reading space at the K4. When we get into a high school, because there's so much square footage in those spaces, they do have the flexible classroom. And we even have moved with Franklin previously, and going into this summer at Stevenson, put an additional space that a class could congregate in an area of the media center. And then there, of course, we have the books. We have basically like a stack area, and they look in different spaces in each high school. They'll be located in different spots, but it all flows then with the seating arrangement, so students can perhaps, if they came down in a full class, they can break apart, they can work in small groups, they can work alone. We have high top tables, we have soft seating, we have traditional lower tables, we might have little group spaces. And at the high school level, from what we've seen at Franklin this year, because we did them, I'm gonna say last year and not put an actual date on it. And those students, if you walk in there, I've found them sitting in the booth by the window, reading or working on their laptop. You see them moving around. At one time, before we did it, Franklin had a full hard lab, a desktop lab in the middle of their library. That's been removed, but now students do more of it's a little bit like if you walked into Schoolcraft or a community college and you saw students sitting on a couch somewhere with their laptop working through something or chatting with a friend, etc. It's got that feel, and that's what Stevenson, while it won't be exactly the same, it's a similar footprint, so they'll have all of those types of spaces created. And a quick story, Mr. Andrew Pacey, the principal over at Franklin, I was talking with him not too long ago, and he said he went into the LMC at Franklin and he observed 5 classes all working in that space. One was in that flexible classroom that had the nano wall. Another was in that secondary space. Students were broken up throughout the LMC, and he was able to bounce from group to group and see 5 different classrooms doing all different work. And he just had a smile on his face. He's like, that's what I imagined it would be. So,
That's excellent. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Mrs. Oquist?
Just one more note, that, as Mr. Weber shared, our earned interest thus far is $4.8 million. And that is significant. For our entire bond in 2013, our total earned interest was $2.4 million. So we have doubled it, and we are only 3 years into the bond.
That's
So
excellent.
2.4 over that period of time. Of course, that's all based on the market and the timing, but knowing that we still have years ahead of us with that, that is really, really significant. And I certainly know we rely on PFM, but I also want to share that Mrs. Smith has been very dogged, as you know, not only about our bond dollars, but our general fund dollars, making sure that they are invested during this time where those dollars are able to earn additional money for the school district that can be utilized in support of our students, our staff, and our schools. And so that really is significant, and I wanted to make sure we put that in comparison, that number in comparison to where we were in the last bond issue.
That's excellent. Thank you. Are there other comments or questions before they proceed on? Nope. Okay, go right ahead.
May we, while we're on the quarterly dashboard, while it's not specifically a financial piece that this generally covers, we do want to talk about a bond update that was a big part of the bond, which was the air conditioning. So we know that a year ago, we had some difficulties with the startup of the air conditioning. And the teams worked, there were so many meetings with so many different contractors and Clark Construction, our construction manager, Plant Man, Real Point, LPS folks. The company that we have those controls on the HVAC, everybody was coming together repeatedly, continuing to talk. And at this point, and we know that today was 80-something degrees, there have been spots, of course, and I sent out an email to all principals and they shared it with their staff stating, this is what we're gonna do if something is going wrong. If you have a leak, it just doesn't work, it's running, but it's not cooling, whatever the case may be, do X. Send that information to this one person, and that one person will then get it out. We certainly have had items, but it's nothing that looked like last year. And it seems to be relatively smooth. Now, if you happen to be listening to this or watching this and you're the one person, one of the few people that has something that occurred, I apologize for that. But we had some pretty big leaks last year. We all know we had some of those issues. All of that seems to have been taken care of. And what we're having now more sounds and feels like yes, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these units across the district, and we have some issues across a small percentage of them, and we've been getting out and getting them fixed as soon as we can. So that feels better, and I like to use the barometer of nobody's coming, like, I haven't gotten a flood of emails saying, what is happening with this AC? It's a disaster, which we had some of those in the fall and in August when we started up. Fortunately, I think folks are being great in the classrooms that are in the buildings. They are getting the information to the right person, and then our team is jumping on it. And some of it might be a contract issue, a contractor, I should say, issue, and some of it might just simply be an LPS issue that we have to check something on it. So thus far, is there anything you wanted to add into that?
No, that was it. We've made substantial steps forward, so it was good news. We wanted to share, all things considered, that the work paid off throughout the winter months, that a lot of contractors were in the building working off shift and correcting the issue, and it worked out to fruition. So the onesie, twosie items we are still addressing with the team, and the contractor's been very responsive, but holistically, it's giant steps forward that we're in a better spot than we were last year.
We're in a better spot. I don't want to make it sound like we're taking a victory lap, because it should have been this way last August, right? But we cobbled it together and said, let's regroup and go back out there.
Okay, excellent. Glad to hear it. Mrs. Frank?
Just that it's clear to staff and teachers where they go if they are having issues. That has been made really clear to them, that here is the path, because it's probably not their building or building manager now.
It actually
It
is.
is? Okay, and then
Yeah.
they contact
Yeah,
your
the
department.
email, I was very, very clear, and I'm recognizing it as being clear because teachers aren't just emailing me, right? They're actually following that process, and then Mr. Lau has his list, and he's able to say, that's for like Clark, or that's for LPS, and we'll
Okay.
do a work order. So the building supervisors, with the principal being copied, so the principal starts to be able to see, hold on, I'm starting to see a pattern, or that's a onesie, twosie, and we're
Okay.
doing the right thing.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments?
I have one final update, and just to
Go
maybe
ahead.
help fill out a little bit. We are, 2025, just so everybody's aware, we are in the midst of the 25 design process.
That's
We're-
why I get screwed
yes,
up,
so
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
we get a mix between 3 different years at a time, but that's more good news, is we're on pace for the 2025 with the goal of getting a bid package out this fall. So everything's on schedule for that as well, for our next round of schools.
That's great.
We're actually gonna be getting back together and going through the drawings with the building folks in like a week or so.
Yeah. So,
All righty. Any other questions with that?
Put that one to bed.
All righty. Seeing none, thank you very much for the quarterly dashboard, and thank you for consistently getting that up on the website. I know not everybody wants to see it, but for those who do follow it, they follow it quite closely, so thank you for getting that information out to our community. And it never hurts, ever, as Mrs. Oakwa said, to thank our community for entrusting us with these dollars to do all these amazing updates for our buildings and for our students and our staff. So thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is item 3B, purchase of electrical switch for Livonia ECC 2021 bond.
Last week at the study session, we had a bit of a conversation about this topic. We do need an exterior electrical switch over at the Livonia Early Childhood Center. We had that, again, brief conversations, basically stating that this is a requirement. It is something that, based upon the electrical requirements in the building, we need to purchase and have installed the switch. So this is going to be an item that's $194,875. That's what we have vetted out on the dollar amount. That not only is the switch itself, which is obviously the majority of that cost, but we also have like the labor and the cost for the site conditions. That means like they'll have to restore some spaces in the area. We'll have temporary generator power that we've been, we'll be needing to use when there's a shutdown, and just generally that whole fixing up the area. I think we have to get a fence around it as well, unless we
yeah,
already have it.
it'll be
So,
enclosed in the fence
yeah.
area, yes.
So all of that is to say, we're bringing to the board for your approval, hopefully at next week's meeting, the funding for this required item over at the ECC. And I will pass the baton over to Mr. Weber to give a little bit of an explanation, again, to you and then to the community with regard to what this is and why we need it.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Francis. So we did speak about this at the study session, then a few months back, we put it on everybody's radar because it did come up. Very high level, the world we're living in with construction materials and shipping dates, we had to release the main switch gear for the electrical gear for the Early Childhood Center ahead of final calculations with DTE, who provides the utility service for the property. The method, or the reasoning behind that is that given the lead times for this electrical gear, it's approaching 52 weeks. We had to release it at that point to hit the end date. We put conservative estimates in with our engineering team, working with DTE and our contractors, knowing there were some unknowns when we released it, but we wanted to do it in a manner that was conservative and still allowed for the project to succeed. Once we received the final calculations from DTE, that order was already placed in queue at the factory. This was new information that it'll add on to that gear. So it was something that if we would have had this information prior to ordering that switch gear, this would have been in that thought. It's not as if there was something that was wrong or bad. It's just, we had to time it right to get the schedule complete, and then knowing that there could be something like this. This is due to the rating inside the electric room. It's a safety feature that in order for LPS staff or staff to get into that building and operate some of the main breakers, this makes it safe for them to work in those rooms in a proper manner. Another one is that it will not be installed prior to the opening day of the Early Childhood Center. However, that's okay. We still meet code right now. We would have to coordinate with DTE if there would need to be a shutdown at the building. However, this will not hold up the opening, and we're already planning ahead for next summer. When the gear arrives, that we'll coordinate with the facility to make sure it's done on off hours and make sure we're not interrupting the programming there. So everything did come in. We did estimate it'd be about $200,000, and we came right at that threshold. So there was no surprises with the pricing. The contractor provided it to us as usual. The engineer reviewed it, and everybody vetted it out. So we felt comfortable once the pricing came in. And once we found that information, everything kind of rolled in place, and we're sitting where we thought we'd be from a few months ago. So.
Questions or comments? No. So this is not something, this is not an additional cost that would not have otherwise, rephrase this. We were either going to pay this amount of money now, or we would have approved it a year ago to still pay now.
That is correct.
So it's not an additional cost that we're incurring because it was not known. It was just simply, we had
Yes.
to wait to this point until we knew exactly what it was we were going to need, and then approve it and purchase it at this point.
Correct.
Okay.
And one other outlier, not to keep getting further in details, but the routing of the infrastructure as well is another cost in it. The existing service for Dickinson at the time, what went through what is now established as a wetlands area, established by the state, that doesn't meet current DT standards. So we did have to route this and go underground all the way to the Niji property. That was a portion of this cost that is captured in here. It was an unknown at the time as well. So just want to make sure that was discussed because there is cost in there for that.
Okay. And as we talked about in the study session, there are a few of our other buildings in the district that have this type of a switch, and it just depends on the kind of electricity and where it's got to go and where it has to travel, from what I understand.
That is correct. Yep. It's all based on the rating of the service provided in the building. So some buildings have it, some don't. It's just a matter of what the ratings are within the building and the size of the facilities.
Okay, all right.
And there was a question at the study session. There is not a recurring fee for this. This is a one-time purchase for that switch. It's not, I knew somebody had asked that, so I want to make it clear, this is
Just the
not a
purchase and
recurring,
installation,
yes.
and it's just there.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments on this? All righty. So we'll put this on the agenda for the voting meeting coming up.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item 3C, Central Office Paving Phase 1 Contractor Award, and this is from the sinking fund. Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. I'm just scrolling down through the many pages that's in that section, but our paving, what we're looking at, as you know, one of the big rocks with the sinking fund has been paving. That's something that after the 2013 bond, when we go to a building the next summer or maybe the one thereafter, we would go into to that building and do paving projects around their parking lot, et cetera. Well, one of the places that we have not done in quite some time is the central office complex. We have quite a bit of paving here, and it takes a lot of beating because we have all the buses. And the buses run to and fro and oftentimes take the same path or two paths in and out of this complex. So what we are looking at is phase 1 of potentially up to 6 phases to do in different sections, this complex. So we put out to bid, and we have, as the low responsible bidder is Nagel Paving, who we're all very familiar with. And we are looking to have, and I put this in the memo, a little bit higher contingency than we usually do from a percentage standpoint, simply because of the unknowns that are going on here. We have a strong thought that there's been many layers that have gone over the years, one on top of the other in this parking lot. So we want to try to be as prepared as possible to recommend a contingency that will get us through this project. We're looking, as we discussed at the study session last week, the 5-mile chute coming in there and up to, but not into where they park, if I'm saying that correctly. If you can imagine the fence that we have where our buses are locked into overnight, it's up to that point. And so again, it's a lot of space, it's a lot of work to get done. People work here all summer long, so we have to be cognizant of that as well. So what we're looking for here is the $891,580, which was the low responsible bid by Nagel. And again, I'm giving you an advance notification that we're looking for a 10% contingency on top of that if the board for.
Yeah.
Oh, it is a section.
So there is a map at the end
section?
of the packet as well. The last
Apologies.
page of the packet will show, there's
Going off top,
yeah,
sorry.
a portion of the bus parking area is also covered in it. I didn't want to cut you off. I was
No,
gonna-
it's okay. No, okay. I said up to the thing, but
Yes.
it is a section of it. You're right. So, yeah, it's all in green and
Yep.
it shows it pretty clearly for you.
Yep. And if anybody's taken the shoot off, we call it the shoot off of 5 Mile, you can see that it is in poor condition and getting worse very quickly. So we made that a priority, and then, as Mr. Francis has noted, there will be 4 to 5 future phases. One, not only from, it's just a big chunk of work and capacity for our contractors to get that much done in one summer, but also from a funding standpoint, we do have a limited amount of dollars annually from the sinking fund that we want to make sure that we still leave money available for the roofing projects, any other paving that may come up, or the miscellaneous equipment needs that Mr. Lau does out of that fund as well.
Comments or questions? Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to hit the fun stuff. This was publicly bid as usual. We made sure to put this on our public website. We received 3 bids from, 3 bids total from contractors we're familiar with. So we had good coverage. Budgeting came right in where we expected to be. We were trying to allocate about $1 million on each phase of these. So we came in right underneath that, which was good news as well to make sure we're right where we wanted to be.
Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you. So when you're repaving that chute and the area right up to where the buses go in, how do the buses get in and out? Is it just you do a half at a time, or?
No, we're leaving Farmington Road open. This was discussed with, we have maintenance, transportation, and Mr. Lau runs his warehouse out of there too. So we talked to all departments. The intent will be we'll leave Farmington Road open. They can still come off of Farmington Road. And we'll have a temporary means to get across our trenched area so the warehouse can still operate, but the buses will still be able to get to the yard off of the Farmington Road entry. There's another gate on the east side of that.
Oh, I didn't realize there was another gate off of Farmington?
No, you still get
Oh,
on the
you still-
property, and then to the east of the main entry for the buses, there's another gate.
To get in and out.
Oh, gotcha.
So they
Closer to the
won't-
meeting.
They won't take that green path out.
He's
They'll
talking right here.
Oh,
stay over to the east.
perfect. Okay, I see that in there.
And of course, we don't have nearly the number of buses moving students over the summer as we do. Now,
Yeah.
we still do move folks in the
Thanks.
summer, but it's a fraction of what we normally do. So summer is the time we want to take care of this.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All righty, and can we put this on the agenda for the voting meeting?
Please.
And the next item on our agenda, I'm sorry, hold on a second here. Next item on the agenda is 3D Livonia ECC wireless access points.
We have, for the new Early Childhood Center, the need for putting Wi-Fi in there, as we do in all of our buildings. So this is just the planned purchase, and it was in the technology budget in the 2021 bond to get the wireless, those access points. If you look up, there's an access point right there above us. So we have, for the Early Childhood Center, $49,356 from Sentinel Technologies. And this is coming from the NASPO competitive contract, so that does fulfill the district's requirement to bid. Again, this is just simply something that we have been waiting to get to the point. The wiring and whatnot is already in the building. We need to actually get the access points in and installed. So we would be doing that over the summer. Right now, we're looking at mid to later May. Obviously, after if the board approves this, then we can get those ordered up. We should be having these installed during the summer.
Okay.
Right now, all the hard wiring is there. As we know, our phones, our desktops, just about everything runs off of the network. But what we wouldn't have from the very beginning is, or at least if someone had to go in and plug in a phone, we don't have the Wi-Fi. But come summer, we would have those access points, and by the time the school building opens, the early childhood center opens, we would be ready to go.
Okay. Alrighty. Questions or comments on this item? Alrighty. Seeing none, next item on our agenda is 3E, classroom projector and document camera replacement. We're already replacing them, which we knew it would go by quickly, and it has.
Technology.
Time flies.
Yeah, technology it's impressive when you get the amount of years we have. Now, grant you, not everything is 10 years old, but we did start in 2014 putting in those short throw interactive projectors and the document cameras that are in all the classrooms. We have over 800 rooms that have all of this technology in it. And over the years, we've of course replaced when something occurred, or if there's just a new space, we will go in there and put in what we've had. But this is now the newest technology. We have a simplified document camera for the classrooms, and by simplified, I don't mean in what it can do. It actually runs off the same software as the projector, and it's a single USB cord and not a spaghetti mess of cords, which it is a little bit now. It'll be nice and clean. And the short throw projectors are, once again, the Epsons, and they are a laser this time as opposed to a bulb. So that is a great high lumen without needing to go around and changing bulbs, which those bulbs are more expensive than you'd think they should be.
Yeah, they are.
But this is something that we, again, had put aside in the technology budget of the 21 bond. And we are coming in with Digital Age Technology as the recommended contractor. We do have, in your packet, you have a letter from IDS and a memo from me with some of the information. But overall, we're looking at $1,902,004.57. It's a very specific dollar amount for you. But that would cover putting in these projectors and document cameras all across the district.
Comments or questions on this item? President Bradford.
Thank you. This is exciting news, but I can't believe we're already replacing it, but I can see technology goes very quickly. I know we have to change. How long do we project these laser short throws and all this equipment? How many years might we get out of this equipment? Can we project, or do we know?
You know, I don't want to. I don't want to make up a number. I know
Right.
that they last far longer than the bulbs, and there's an ongoing cost with all of our projectors when the bulbs burn out and you change them, and they burn out and they change them. The general lifespan of the laser, I'll get that for you, and I can shoot you guys an email.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because
off the top of my
once
head,
it
I don't
turns to
know.
laser, we don't have to replace bulbs,
Right.
but then I wonder longevity, how much
Have
time
you
we
ever
get
heard
out of
of
that.
No,
so.
we usually ballpark 10 years, just
Yeah.
plus or
Yeah,
minus. But yeah, it's,
Okay.
some fail a lot sooner than others, and some are still doing fine, so it's just hard
If
to
they
predict.
do fail, does that mean the entire short throw now will have to be replaced as opposed to just the
Versus-
bulb?
Right.
I'll check on that
Yeah,
for
we
you.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a good question.
I just want to make a note as well that, giving credit to Mr. Clan and IDS, our technology consultant, the new laser projectors actually use the same bracket, so it's a very cost-efficient,
great.
cost-effective means that the new projector will go right in place of the old one. Some cabling will have to be upgraded, but it's a giant cost savings to try and use that methodology versus taking everything out, putting everything back in. So very favorable pricing, and the bulk price that was purchased, it was, the unit pricing per unit came down quite a bit, so it was a very good cost that
Oh,
we
that's
saw in this
awesome.
process.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Mrs. Frank?
Just wanted to say, I think as we're talking about this, it seems like a lot of money, but I think these are such important investments. And Mrs. Okos can probably speak to this better, but what it does for the teachers in the classrooms, and to be able to project something onto the wall, and to be able to project something for the kids, to be able to look at in the olden days, they used to have make the transparencies and go to the office, and now they can just put the textbook under the camera, or what they're doing, they can write on the walls. And so or not on the walls, but on the screen. And I just think it's so important that we give our teachers tools that they can utilize and that they can use to better our effective educating. And so I love that we're spending money on this. I hate that we're spending money on this, but I think it's it's something that we're really going to see in the classroom as teachers learn and they can grow in their education, and it can help and assist kids growing and learning, and really what we're talking about in all of our reviews of grades and where they are and where the kids are. I think this really makes an impact.
Yeah,
Thank
these are
you.
daily use items.
Yeah.
Almost all day use
Yeah,
items.
yeah.
Mrs. Acosta?
Sorry, I just put a cough drop. I was gonna say, the fact that the bulbs keep giving out lets us know that they're being put to good use. And so I think a question that came up, I think during the study session, was what will happen with the ones that we're replacing?
So the vendor that is installing will take those off and those get recycled. That's all handled as a turnkey operation by Sentinel, who's doing the work.
Mr. Francis, you mentioned Digital Age and then
sorry, yes.
Sentinel.
It's a Digital Age.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it was Digital Age. Sentinel was the last recommendation.
Oh, okay, all right, I see Sentinel in the packet. Is one a manufacturer and one the distributor?
It should be one or the other.
Sentinel is.
Digital Age is also here.
Excuse me.
Hang on.
If you go through the package, the memo for the wireless access points is followed by a Sentinel quote. And then when we get to the next memo on the projector and document cameras, the quote after it is DAT.
There you go.
Got it. Okay, sorry about that.
No, that they're right next
Thank
to each
you.
other.
Okay,
In
thank
fact,
you.
it's sandwiched in between the two, so, yep.
Thank you. And Sentinel was also on the previous one. Yeah, all right, there's a lot of names floating around. I got it.
Both have done substantial amount of work in the
Quite a
district.
bit,
Okay.
yes. You're used to both of them, yes.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Alrighty,
Voting meeting, please?
voting meeting for this one, yep. And
Yeah.
are we all set?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda, and the last one for Building and Site, is 3F, the 2024-2025 leases. Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. It's that time of year. We're in May, and our leases run generally concurrently with our fiscal year, which is June 1 to July 30. And so we have the three in the memo. You also have the drafts of each of the leases. We have Himawari Preschool, that's at Nigiero. They've been with us for many years, well-known. And then we have Little Tots, that's at Cass, also been with us for many years. And the Garfield Cooperative Preschool, it currently is being called the Garfield Cooperative Preschool at Marshall, but they are actually moving back, of all places, to Garfield. So the Garfield Cooperative Preschool will be back at its home. The three leases, well, the two leases, I should say, the Himawari and the Little Tots, per contract, there is, the CPI is the increase on beginning July 1. So CPI for the Detroit metro area, 2.8%. It's really just that simple. Per contract, that is the increase. With regard to Garfield Cooperative Preschool, because it's a new space, there's some different square footage. It's just some differences in general. We did look at current market rates for leasing business properties, and with the help of Bill Bowman, who has been our real estate guru that we really rely on for information, he did a bit of a deep dive, and Allison Smith, the CFO, and I talked with him, got the range, talked with the Garfield Cooperative Preschool, knowing that they're a co-op. They're really just a small group that relies on basically parents in Livonia, in the neighborhood, for funding. We have them in that range in a price that they could afford. So we kind of landed somewhere in the low to mid-range of the general per square footage. They are absolutely over the moon to be back at Garfield. And frankly, Garfield's pretty excited about it as well.
Yeah, that's great. Comments or questions? Yeah, Garfield has been around for a long time. I know it's, I'm not even sure how many years, but I know I utilized it with our kids who are now well out of college, but when they were and it is, they employ one teacher and the parents, with it being a co-op, the parents rotate going in and assisting, so they have proper ratios and everything, but yeah, it's an interesting way to do preschool, but it's very effective, and it certainly suits a need for a portion of our community, so. All righty. And this is are all three of those going to go on the consent agenda? Is that all right with everybody? Since they're repeating?
And
the
as
wishes?
we did last year, started last year going with electronic signatures. So
Okay.
Mrs. Bradford, and I believe it's the secretary, right? So that'd be you, Mrs. Costa. So you'll get that at some point after the board votes on it. I'll be sending those out to the folks, having them get an electronic signature, and then it'll just push to you, and it'll probably be in order for yourself, and then yourself, or vice versa. However I set it up, it'll all be automated, and when it's all done, it'll pop back to me, and I'll have them all finished off.
Okay, we'll look for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. That concludes Building and Site.
Great job.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Thank you, Mrs. Burton, for running that. And we're going to move on to item 4, the Finance Committee. And I'm going to be turning this over to Mrs. Bonifield. So you're all set, Mrs. Bonifield?
Thank you, President Bradford. Our first item is purchase of copy paper with Phil Francis.
Come on back.
I want to make it dramatic. It's a whole different section.
Yes, this is a new area. We're in finance now, Phil, so switch it over.
The copy paper we had purchased, or we usually bring to the board somewhere around August for a purchase for the year. And at this point, we did need to come back to ask the board to authorize a higher amount. What we found was that, I think specifically really the high schools were ordering a little bit more, and that's because we didn't account for them. They were getting some paper from a different vendor previously, and then we're ordering then their full amounts from the warehouse, and that threw off our numbers last year with our estimate. So I would like to come to the board and ask for an increased amount in order to have the board's approval to fulfill those orders.
Yep.
Any questions? Oh, go ahead, Madeline.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if this will be included in the consent agenda, as we usually do for.
Is that okay with everybody?
Fine with me.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yep.
fine with us for consent
And
agenda.
then, Mr. Johnson, did you have a question?
I did have a question. Mr. Francis,
Yes.
then when, in August, I think you said August is when we generally,
Generally get it we'll probably do it, hopefully I'd rather even do it in July, because school starts in early August, or late August.
yeah.
Yep, so we'll count for a different number, and we'll
Okay.
bring a larger number. We always have the goal of trying to capture the right guesstimation and then
Okay.
keeping an eye on it. So we're gonna keep, or have a conversation about what's the right amount, and just sort of make sure we have that number a little bit higher,
Okay.
so we don't have to come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we decided on consent agenda.
I think so.
Thank you,
Yep,
Mr.
consent.
Francis. Then we will move on to the LPS merchandise purchase with Mrs. Smith.
Good evening, thank you. Similar to our last agenda item, I'm coming tonight to request additional authorization for our LPS merchandise purchase. As you'll recall, as we discussed at the study session last week, the board approved our LPS spiritware or merchandise purchase in March, and I asked for authorization of $100,000. At that point, because we open up a store to staff, we don't know what staff will participate, nor what piece of apparel that they will pick. We now have that final number, and it takes us just slightly over the $100,000 that I requested. So our total dollar amount is $101,458. So with the board's approval, I'd like to ask for a little bit of additional authorization. And if it's okay with the board, maybe, because again, don't want to come back again, maybe in the cap sheet, I'll ask for an additional $5,000 to be additionally, just very cautious in case maybe a staff member doesn't receive a piece or something like that, just so that we've got a little cushion in the event something like that comes up when those items get delivered, which they should get delivered either this week or at the latest before Memorial Day. So that's exciting news. And I shared with the board last week, but I'll share it again for our community. It was wonderful to see just how many staff participated. We had 1,548 staff members go onto the store and pick a piece of LPS merchandise. So it's always wonderful to be out visiting our buildings and seeing so many people showing their LPS pride and wearing their apparel, as Mr. Johnson is. It looks fantastic. So,
Questions? Mrs. Burton?
If any of the additional funds of the additional requested $5,000 are not utilized for this purpose, I assume that they'll go back into the general fund. Is
it
that
sure
correct?
does, yep.
Okay.
And
Right.
really, we haven't issued payment yet to the vendor or anything like that. So yes, if none of those funds are needed, it'll just go, I hate to say go back to the general fund because it's never been
It's
out
in
of the
there,
general
yeah.
fund, but yep, exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you. What other thing?
Can we-
No, go ahead.
Can we also put this on the consent agenda? Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, anything else on the LPS apparel? Thank you again for doing that. We know that that's a huge morale booster for our staff. We will move on to C, which is Wayne reset budget for 24-25, Mrs. Smith.
Perfect. And again, I shared at last week's study session, this is something that boards across the state are legally required to adopt a resolution either in support of or not in support of their ISDs or intermediate school districts' proposed budget for the coming school year. So Wayne Risa did share their proposed budget with us for each one of their funds, as well as an FAQ document and a proposed resolution. It appears that they continue to be in a very healthy financial position in respect to all of their funds. And one item of note for us is they did include in their proposed budget those, what they like to call one-time payments, but payments that have been going on now for a number of years, and we like to include in our proposed budget. So it was asked that they include that in their proposed budget, so we can confidently include those in our proposed budget. So they've taken the suggestion and they have included those in the proposed budget. So from my review, I would think this is something that our district could support.
Questions?
No.
We're good? And again, are we okay to put this on the consent agenda, or do you guys want to?
I'm fine with consent.
Good to go, it's regular business, annual.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an
I'm fine.
annual.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm fine with consent
All right,
agenda.
Is
Consent
everybody
agenda
all
on
right with
that.
the consent agenda?
Mhm.
Okay. Mrs. Smith, you have one more item with us, the,
Oh, one moment.
of course.
I believe that we can.
Are we able to do that when we're making a resolution or
To put it on consent.
to put it on the consent agenda?
If we're-
We would send it
Yep.
off to them with your approval in the minutes.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay.
And that's how we
perfect.
could prepare the resolution for next Monday in support of, so that that would be what
Yes.
you're
Yep.
approving.
Excellent. Okay, perfect. Let's put that on the consent agenda then.
Okay, and then Mrs. Smith, can you help us out with appointment of auditors?
Yes, last but not least is an annual item that we bring before the board. As you know, we are required to engage an external auditor to come in and audit our financial statements. And as part of that process, they also are auditing our internal controls, taking a look at our procedures and our processes to make sure that we're safeguarding our funds, that we're preventing fraud wherever possible. They also audit our federal awards, CFA report. That's the schedule of federal awards. It involves a number of weeks that they are on site, sometimes also remote, that they're pulling records, taking samples, and they're making sure that we're being compliant with federal laws, with state laws, as well as local laws, those board policies and board policies that are adopted by you to make sure, again, that we're safeguarding those funds. We have used Plant Moran for a number of years. We've continued to find great value in engaging them. They are the largest accounting firm of K-12 school districts here in the state of Michigan. You can tell by their depth of their bench, they have a lot of folks that are always on the cutting edge when there's additional GASBs coming out that we need to be aware of, that they're offering training to us throughout the years. So it is my recommendation that we engage them for this coming fiscal year end. So I bring that recommendation to the board.
Questions? Mr. Johnson?
Just a comment. Thank you, Mrs. Smith, for sending us the breakdown of the costs over the last few years. That was very helpful to look and see that this is a reasonable increase for them based on the historic data that you gave us. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course, yep.
Any other questions or comments? All right, can we toss this one on the consent agenda? Are we okay with that? All right.
Well, this is going to be a
Excellent.
a good meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Well, it's the end of the year, right? So we have a lot of usual business
Yes, you're right.
that's popping up.
Put it back up again.
So that concludes finance. And Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. All right, we're just moving along here. We're going to go on to item 5, our curriculum committee, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, President Bradford.
You
And
are welcome.
Our first item is 5A, 35J grant purchases, and we will have Mrs. O'Brien's presenting.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hold on one second.
Take your time.
I am very excited to share with you that we received a grant that we applied for from the state of Michigan, the 35J Early Literacy Grant. What they were looking for is for school districts to apply to make sure that they had a consistent model for the science of reading, to provide students access to books, wide variety of interest level books and diverse texts, and to support the idea of consistent professional development. So these funds were actually allocated by the legislator last summer. These funds were released to apply for in February and with a quick turnaround in March. So we applied for them and we received $1.8 million to spend on literacy over the next year and a half. So very exciting. What we put into our grant is training for our teachers for Orton Gillingham and Orton Gillingham's morphology, which is for our 3rd and 4th grade teachers. This is the curriculum that we are using for word study. So this grant will allow us to continue to train new teachers, teachers new to a grade level, our resource room teachers, and our support teachers, ESTs, interventionists, and make sure all of our teachers have access to the same Tier 1 training that we've been providing for our K2 and then our 3-4 teachers. One of the nice things about this grant is that it's preschool through 5th grade. So that's a nice thing because we're including our preschool. Actually, ISME, who provides the professional development for Orton Gillingham, does have a phonemic awareness training for preschool. So we will be including our preschool teachers in that. But then one of the negative parts of the grant is because most elementary schools are K-5, these grants cannot be used for our 6th graders, and we have 5th and 6th together. So there are some negatives to that because it might not feel right in an upper elementary that our 5th grade teachers are going to get some additional professional development and then some materials that we will not be allowed to spend this grant money on for our 6th graders. We'll also be using this grant to provide materials that support our word study program. The sand, the screens, the whiteboards, so provide all of our teachers with that. And then one of the most exciting parts of it is to provide our students with books. So we wrote into the grant that every student could take home 5 books this summer, choose their own books, and then 5 books next summer. And that is a big bulk of this grant. And so we were very excited when it got approved that we could begin to talk to our elementary, to Dr. Dodge at Jackson Center, our elementary principals, about how we could order and provide our kids access to take home 5 books of their choosing for the summer. So that is currently happening in lots of different ways. And we have book fairs going on, book orders, different publishers that they've arranged with. I created a book order that you could use for Amazon, asking the media specialist what would be the top books for each grade level, so we could do that. So each school is doing it their own way so that we don't have a logjam of publishers not being able to provide us those books for the summer. So that's very exciting. And then one of the other things this grant provides is books for our classroom libraries, which we will spend next year to update and get new books for our classroom libraries. So $1.8 million, a lot of fun to spend that in order to support our students. The last area for this is really to support your Tier 1 curriculum. And this evening, I'm bringing to you some purchases that will support our elementary curriculum. Mrs. Corey requested, as we were writing the grant, that we buy some new books for our integrated modules. And so we put $100,000 worth of books into this grant. And so you have quotes to purchase. So we'd like to purchase those now so that they're here for the start of school. We have books from Mrs. Nelson's Book Company, Scholastic Education Solutions, Benchmark Education and Book Source, Hamry, and then Kids Discover magazine we are utilizing to help support some of the social studies within our integrated units in K4. And so those purchases we'd like to bring this month to be approved. In addition, that we would like to purchase, and I brought these last spring, the coupons, I'll call them the coupons, for training for Orton Gillingham. So we purchased them now, and that way then they offer a wide variety of training options for our teachers. They can do it over the summer, they can do it in the evenings, they could do, there's a Friday night for a certain number of Fridays, there's a Saturday one, and then any teachers who'd prefer to do it during the day, we do offer them then a substitute for them to do it during the day. But I would say 75 to 85% of our teachers between K through 4 have done it on their own time. We've provided them a stipend to do that on their own, and that stipend we've also written into the grant. Nice. And so part of our initial purchase here is, I have 2 quotes for you for IMSE, and that is for both the training and the materials that we would like to purchase to support our word study. And then the last thing we'd like to purchase with the start of using this grant is those books for students. And the memo that I wrote you, I'm not exactly sure how I forgot that part. That's why I passed out a new memo. I think because I didn't have a quote. And that's a big number to forget to ask for board approval. So we are looking to also, at next month's voting meeting, vote to approve the purchase of 5 books for every student preschool through 5th grade. The amount of money that we have set aside in the grant is $292,500.
President Bradford.
Thank you. Okay, so this is so awesome. I'm just really excited about this grant because this is going to just really impact our students, all pre-K to 5. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for the time you put into go for these grants because
pleasure.
I know it takes a lot of time and effort to put these grants together. You did say the grant came in quickly, so we wanted to make some purchases. How much time do we have to spend the entire 1.8 million? Is there a deadline for
Yes,
that?
at the end of next summer.
Oh, I missed.
So
did
we
I-
have
You
just-
probably already said that,
I
right?
didn't say
Okay.
a date, so over 2 years you have to spend it, so.
By the
we
end
have-
of next summer?
And
Okay.
Rebecca Williams in Ms. Smith's department, we had to put some things in this first year, part of the grant. So these purchases we identified in the grant for the first year, and then we have more time next year to
So
spend.
this amount will satisfy our need to get the grant going?
Correct.
And then now we'll have a little breathing room to also continue to find other uses for the money that we're gonna,
Yep, I have a couple things I'll bring in June,
Okay.
which we don't have to have in hand by June 30th, so they'll be in next year's budget, but I will bring some more purchases next month that will go from the grant.
awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Burton?
First off, 1.8 million is enormous. I think that's the largest grant I've ever heard of us getting for anything.
It's the largest I've ever written.
Yeah, it is really, really a huge
It's a
amount of
major-
money.
Yes.
So I don't want that lost on anyone in our community. Every now and then we hear suggestions that we have a grant writer. We have 2,000 employees, many of whom write grants. And many are very successful. This just takes the cake. I mean, this is huge. $1.8 million for literacy to infuse extra literacy into our kiddos is just fabulous. It's also really exciting. Many of our kids have healthy libraries in their own homes. Many of them do not. And sometimes that kind of wanes over time. You get this big preschool push and it wanes as they get into their elementary years. So this is huge, that kids not only get books, but they get books that they get to choose.
Yep.
So there's much more excitement if they get to pick their books. I think it's just absolutely amazing, but I don't want that lost on anyone in our community how enormous this is. This is a huge grant, and it's for the best possible reason I can think of.
I agree,
Exactly.
100%.
Totally.
One question I had, there's obviously anyone who shopped for kids' books knows there's an enormous price range for kids' books. How do we manage that when some books can be just a few dollars and some books can be many dollars? How does that work?
In order to put an amount of money in the grant, I said 5 books with a cap of $10 a book, so $50 a student. So schools who are doing a book fair are giving a $50 coupon for
Okay.
students to buy books. They can't buy other things, none of the fun things sometimes at
tchotchkes and all
Scholastica.
that.
The posters and the
Yeah.
erasers and things. It has to be for books. So that a 4th or a 5th grader who may find some chapter books, then they could balance. I can tell you Riley is ready to go for their book fair, and Mrs. O'Harris has a whole list of books from $3 to $11. She didn't really go past that, figuring that that would balance out, that they'd be able to get 5 books within that range.
In Cleveland had theirs today, and their kiddos were having a
Shopping
blast
away.
selecting
That is
their,
so exciting.
their 5 books, so.
So if they have a $50 coupon or gift card or whatever we want to call
If it
it
goes
to use, could they actually wind up with 6 or 7 if they're choosing less expensive books?
Yes.
Okay, so each child is going to have, the way it's operating then for this summer, each child, if it's through the book fair, has up to $50 to spend.
Up to $50. 5 books, up to $50.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's very exciting.
It's very cool.
Oh, that's
That's
wonderful.
really amazing. Thank you to all of our team who write grants on a regular basis, because when you add them all up, and I think we did at one point, we added up how many grants in a year or something, and it was a huge number. But again, 1.8 million is just enormous. So thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
It's very exciting.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Thank you. One thing that you mentioned during your discussion was that the training for the teachers is tier 1. And I find that really exciting because we we do a lot, and as we go tier 2 and tier 3, it's necessary to get everybody, but this is nice because it touches this is touching every single student in the pre-K to 5. So I find that really exciting. And then at one time, there was a statistics that I heard that if a child has 3 books at home, their reading level, do you know that statistic at all, or what it is? I mean, I think for some families, having books in the home, this is really more impactful than I think a lot of us realize, that just having a few books in the home, and especially, again, we've talked about the kids are getting to pick their own books, they're gonna be excited about their books. And it'll be interesting to I don't know if there's any way that we can see the data, but, that we have summer learning loss, right? And it just, I think being able to send books home to kids is just giant.
It absolutely is. And they, I don't know that exact statistic, but for students to have books in their home and books that they read and reread, I mean, if we think of some books we might have read in our day, over and over and over again, and you learn the rhythm and the rhyme of that book. It's not just about reading the book, but it's about learning how books work. It's about how words work. And so for students to have books that they're interested in, whether I choose a book about bugs or I like to read Junie B. Jones, either way, it's something I'm going to be excited to take home. If I might have chosen it for everyone, there might have been like, great, but that's not of interest to me. And that's what this grant gave us, was that ability to allow our students to find themselves in books. And that's what we want them to be.
Exactly.
And I think another thing that we don't want to go unnoticed is that you mentioned that there was a very quick turnaround on this. And again, the kudos to you for writing this grant, and that you took the extra time. I'm sure you spent many extra hours.
My department worked very hard on it to make sure it fit
that
what
we got it
wanted.
in, even though it wasn't convenient or, had a lot of time. You guys buckled down, did the work, and got this grant. And I think we're gonna hopefully see some good results in the fall when we start our initial eye readiness testing and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
that'd be great,
I think
yeah.
it'll be good to kind of get a feel for that, and then be like, wow, this is really great. So thank you,
Absolutely.
just fantastic.
You're welcome.
I just want to echo what everyone said. The amount of money that was generated from this grant writing is outstanding. I think for me, as an avid reader, the minute you said they get to pick 5 books, that the media specialists came up with this coupon, whatever we call it, but this coupon for each kid to have the same amount of money to show up to the book fair and to spend it the way that they want to on books that they want is so impactful. It chokes me up, just that level of equity is just beyond for me. The fact that you considered which way teachers would best want to do the PD for Orton Gillingham, including the stipend, the ability to have a sub. I mean, I think everything was really considered in writing this grant, and kudos to you and your staff. We love everything about this, and I'm so excited to see this and to know that this isn't just this summer.
No.
Next summer, they get to pick more books as well.
That's what I get excited, because then we can have a little bit more time to plan even better next year, and it won't have to be, so we have 4 weeks left and we have books to buy. Next year, we can plan a little bit better, so I'm very excited about that, in addition to the classroom libraries, which I think is another fabulous thing for classroom teachers to be able to buy the newer picture books that come out, or the newest version of Junie B. Jones or whatever chapter book their students like. So like that is so exciting that our kids are gonna have access to new books in their classrooms and then have them at home.
Thank you. Thanks again. Okay, we're going to move on to item 5B, World History Textbook Adoption and Purchase.
Yes, on the regular agenda.
Oh,
yes.
regular.
Yep. I am
We want to talk about that.
excited to bring our first social studies committee's textbook recommendation. So Mrs. Rousseau has been working. Social studies is an area we hadn't tackled with new textbooks over the last several years. Their department, we did ELA and really focus on ELA at all of our levels, and Mrs. Rousseau oversees ELA and social studies. She spent the year with several textbook committees, and this first one, World History, is the one that they're prepared to make a recommendation to us. And so they had a team of teachers from each one of our high schools, and they are recommending History Alive, which is a publisher we have worked with at different levels. And they looked at 5 different textbooks, and the third quarter is when they piloted and used the materials with their students, and then asked students how they felt about using these books. Our current world history book is older, but not as old as some of our other books. I think it's a 2012, so, you know, as we have brought all of these books over the last several years, we've had some a little bit older than that. But we are recommending History Alive World History for our regular world history that our students take, and then our accelerated world history. They'll utilize the book for both groups. So one thing I wanted you to notice in my memo, I had a different amount of money than I did on the quote, and this is the first time my department has done textbook quotes and memos in a little while, and so we sent you the wrong quote.
Oh,
So the updated quote I just
It's
passed
right
out to you, it was missing one section of accelerated world history at one of our high schools. So Mrs. Rousseau had gotten a second quote with additional books, and so I wanted to make sure you had a copy of that. So this quote is for 15 teachers worth of licenses and teacher guides. They're reproducibles. And then there are some connection play cards that they utilize. All of those materials are being provided by the publisher for free. And then we are buying 6-year licenses. Some are bundled with textbooks, and some are the additional licenses. As you might remember, at our high schools, we've kind of moved to a class set of textbooks, so not a hard book in every student's hand. They have access to that book plus all the digital resources, but every teacher needs to have a set in her classroom. And so this has enough books for all of the teachers who are teaching world history next year, and then those additional licenses. So it's a total of 960 student licenses, and that's how many students that we'll need to have over the next 6 years to have access to world history.
Any questions, comments? Mrs. Burton?
Just so I understand how the numbers break out again. So the 960 licenses.
Yep.
Are those licenses going from one student the next year to the following student coming in that grade? Or does one license follow one student for
One
4 years?
license is for one student per year. We have 6 years worth of licenses for all of
Okay.
our students who are in world history. So
Okay.
the 600 is with a textbook bundle and 6 years worth of licenses, and then we bought an additional 360 licenses. So that's how many we will need for every student to have access to that book for 1 year during world history or accelerated world history. over the next 6 years.
Okay.
So they are transferable.
That's where
If-
I'm going
yes.
with
Okay.
that.
So,
So what,
yes.
they go
So-
through one student, and the next year they go to another batch of
Correct. If
students.
Mrs. Frank
Got
is
it.
going to take it next year, my license ends in June, and that
Oh,
license is applied
okay.
to someone
Got it.
else the next year.
Got it, that
Now
makes
I
sense.
got
That's
it.
what a 6-year, yes.
Okay. So we will wind up with 600 books,
600 books.
like hardcover books as we
Correct.
know them. Okay.
Yep, a set of 35 per classroom,
Okay, got
or
it.
teacher, per teacher who teaches world history.
Okay. And as we have said now for years and years and years, when folks ask, we really don't have an option to save money by only going with digital or only going with a print, because those things, they're coming together from the publisher. I mean, we don't have a lot of option of ditching one in favor
No,
of just the
we
other.
really believe we need to have some physical copies,
Mm-hmm.
and we feel like we cannot move away from digital copies
No.
of anything anymore. So
Absolutely.
we absolutely need both. We can save money by just having a class set and not having a student have a book and the book online. So I don't have to take the book home.
Mm-hmm.
Students who want to can check it out from their teacher, but all of them have access to that same book plus additional things
Information.
Right,
on the
a lot of other
platform.
resources, uh-huh.
It can help them understand, it can help them read, it highlights, helps them annotate. So there's so many features to the online book that we want to make sure that is the thing that every student gets. And then we have the textbook in the classroom for the teacher who wants to pull out books and talk about the same thing, and maybe their Chrome card isn't all charged or whatever. We have that access to the
Okay.
books. But then a student who prefers to read a book can check that book out too.
Okay.
So there's that balance of both of those things. But no, money-wise, digital is what we need now, and then we want to have copies in our classrooms.
Okay, all right, sounds great. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Mrs. O'Brien.
You're welcome.
That concludes the curriculum committee report.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. Great job. All right, we're moving on to item 6, our policy committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Frank.
Thank you, President Bradford.
Oh, you're
We
welcome.
have a chunk of policies to review tonight to bring our policies up to date. The first one is 6A, Board Policy Instructional Program, ICFA, Curriculum Guides and Course Outlines. Mrs. O'Brien.
Yes, thank you. I have this policy, curriculum guides and course outlines, that I would like to update. It is from 2014, and left the main part of the policy there, but updated some of the verbiage. I can read through it so that then if there are things you'd like to change or support. So the Board of Education delegates to the professional staff the responsibility for developing and writing curriculum guides, courses of study, syllabi, and other such materials describing the nature of our instructional program in detail. Curriculum guides will include the state standards taught, instructional strategies, resources, and technology to meet the diverse needs of students. Guides will include the priority standards that will be assessed on the district common assessments.
Okay, any questions?
Yes, in the one sentence you read,
Yep.
did you mean to say in the middle that instructional strategies and techniques?
Oh, yep,
Okay.
sorry, I skipped over.
No, that's
and
okay.
techniques. Thank you. Instructional strategies and techniques, resources.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mrs. O'Brien, don't
Yeah.
we usually say the district's instructional program instead of our instructional program?
Oh, good, yes.
The nature of the district's instructional program in detail? Isn't that, yes or no?
Yep,
Okay.
or the instructional program even.
Yes.
So,
So it doesn't say
and
our.
other such materials describing the nature of the instructional program, and leave it the way it was
Say
previously.
leave it the way it was
Yeah.
And take-
previously,
Instead of our.
instead of our.
Okay?
Okay?
Second paragraph, in recognition of the the needs of students, and the teaching styles and techniques of teachers, it is expected that these instructional guides will provide an outline with a recommended pacing in order for students to be prepared for the end of marking period assessments. All teachers will exercise sensitivity and creativity in their planning and in their instruction and management of individual students and student groups. Good? Yep. That administration shall keep a file of current curriculum guides, course of studies, syllabi, and list of course materials in the Academic Services Department, where they may be accessible to the members of the Board of Education, to parents, and to citizens of the community in general. Such materials shall be regularly reviewed and revised so that they represent current best practices, state standards, and updated resources. The school district's curriculum will be consistent with requirements of the state and federal government.
Any questions on that? I just have, is there any precedent or any other districts that put these courses of study online? Like under your offices, just wondering if anybody does that.
So we have been working on that. So, over the past 2 years in our district teams and working on our CSAs, we've been building curriculum maps started with all of our core courses. And they're very detailed for a teacher to utilize. So this summer, I'm going to pare them down and then post them on the website.
Wow.
Since we've updated them in almost every core course and every grade level. And so that way then a parent would have access to that. They don't need to know, they don't need the instructional strategies maybe, but they
Right.
should know the resource, what's in that unit
Yeah.
and those things. So we do actually have it all digitally. I'm just trying to make it for a parent. So we don't
Right.
want the assessments, teachers have the assessments link, that doesn't need.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really great. Thank you for doing that. I
Oh.
think it'll be helpful.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions on ICFA? Okay, moving on to.
So that will go for a first reading
Yes.
for next
Yes.
week? Okay,
Yes.
great.
IDA, Basic Instructional Programs. Mrs. O'Brien.
Yep, so IDA is from 2014 also, and I am recommending that we change the title to Educational Programming. And I just rewrote it, so it made it float a little bit more easily. So it reads, "The educational programming is designated for preschool through post-secondary students in Livonia Public Schools. The educational programming will meet the academic, social, emotional, and career and college needs of the students entrusted to the district through meeting current laws, state standards, and accrediting requirements. The Board of Education or their designee shall establish and enforce policies and standards for school operation to ensure equitable education programs, curricula, offerings, and opportunities."
Any feedback on that one?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Mrs. Frank?
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is just a preference thing. Hang on a second, where was I? The last sentence of the first paragraph says, "The educational programming will meet the academic, social, emotional, and career and college needs of the students entrusted to us, to the district." Entrusted to the district through meeting current laws, state standards, and accrediting requirements. I would just suggest that we flip it so that state standards is first and current laws is second. That's absolutely not necessary or mandatory, but I just like the idea that we're hitting state standards first. I mean, that's our goal. Not that we're not going to be meeting state laws, but the goal of the district is not to hit state laws. The goal of the district is to hit state standards.
So you're suggesting
Just flip the
move
order of the
those
two.
So
And
meeting
wherever you want to
state
put
standards.
accrediting requirements, if you decide to move that also and put current laws last, I don't really care. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Anything else on that one? No? Okay, let's move on to the next one. First reading again, Mrs. Costa?
Yes, please.
Board Policy IDDB, remedial education. Mrs. O'Brien.
So this board policy is from 1988. So we would definitely like to update it because we don't call it remedial education anymore. So I would like to rename this board policy as the multi-tiered system of supports. And I rewrote it to read, the Livonia Public Schools School District will provide a multi-tiered system of supports that provides additional instructional and behavioral supports to students who need additional time, lots of additional, instruction or guidance to meet grade level standards. The school district will abide by federal and state laws when providing interventions and supports.
Questions? Mrs. Bradford?
Well, are you taking out additional time? You just mean time?
I think, I'm wondering if I should take the first additional out, that provides
I thought
instructional
we
and
talked-
behavioral.
Yeah, we did talk about that last week,
And then,
didn't we?
because they do sometimes need more time to learn
Right.
something, so I'd rather keep
Yeah,
it
I
there.
think we did talk
Yeah.
about
Take
that.
out the first one
Yeah.
out. Uh-huh.
Anything else?
So you're taking out after provides additional
Yeah.
instruction, it'll just be provides instructional behavior supports.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Yes.
Yes,
First
please.
Board Policy JN, letter jackets, letter awards, and scholarships. Mr. Etu is coming right up to take us through this policy. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
This is Board Policy JN, which we are familiar with. It should be uploaded to your board book, but I have paper copies if you so want them as well.
Nope.
There's, in board book, you should have, in board book, there should be a set that includes the board policy, the administrative procedures, and the guidelines that shows our edits. I believe as well as a set that includes a clean copy of each of those three.
Final copy.
The final copy, correct. So in the board policy, JN, it will be titled Letter Jackets, Letter Awards, and Scholarships. The first two paragraphs there were part of the original board policy, and then we worked through the last couple months in adding language regarding letter jackets and letter awards.
Okay. This is a lengthy, I don't think that we need to read this one. We have read this one several times, but we'll just give you a few minutes if anybody wants to just refresh their memory on this one. But we have read through this several times in study session. Yes, Mrs. Burton?
Mr. Etu, can you, I know we asked this question, I just don't remember the answer. Can you remind me why we have scholarships as part of the title?
So the original title was Awards and Scholarships, and if you look at the first paragraph there, it should be the policy of the school district to give appropriate recognition. So we count scholarships as appropriate recognition, and we want to keep that included in the board policy.
I'm still a bit confused. Are we talking about like scholarships that we award to our students?
Correct. So for instance, the Carly Scholarship that's
Right.
awarded to each high school student, we didn't want to remove that in its totality from this board policy to show that we still do that recognition through scholarships at the high school or middle school level.
Okay.
Is it addressed in the administrative procedures?
The administrative
Scholarships?
procedures are, I can add that if you'd like to, that specific language in terms of what it goes to in terms of scholarships.
No, but I'm wondering,
We need to.
if we take it out, it just seems like it would tighten up this policy because it doesn't talk about any other scholarships or,
We should add it to the policy or take it out of the title.
yes, yes. That's what I think too. It either needs, it should be addressed in the policy or not in the title.
Somewhere, either in the policy or administrative procedures.
But I don't
does
know
it-
that scholarships need to be board policy.
I can
Do
see.
they?
I can see how they would, but I do agree, even if it's a one-liner with our intention to continue, recognizing athletic scholarships.
So add it to the board policy?
I think it
If-
should be
yeah, if
added
it's-
to the
if it's in
board
the title, it
policy
should be
somewhere.
somewhere,
There should be an
some kind of
explanation on
content in there.
scholarship.
Okay.
So I can go one of two ways. I can do that. I can keep J in as we see it now, and then add into administrative procedures, more detail of what scholarships means. Or I can go back to the original JN of awards and scholarships, and then create a JNA, let's say, that is letter jackets and letter awards.
You've lost me.
To keep J in the way it
It would
was.
branch out. It'd be, so
Create a new
it
policy.
would split it.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
I honestly, because we've expanded the letter jackets and we've kind of made it with, it's very specific about letter
Okay.
jackets and jackets that I think it should be two different policies.
Like
I agree.
JN-A?
So the original policy was JN, which was awards and scholarships. There was no reference to our
Oh.
expanded version of letter jackets and letter awards in
Yes.
JN. So we can keep that a very simple JN policy of awards and scholarships as you see in those first two paragraphs.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And then create a brand new policy, putting letter jackets and letter awards as its own independent on a brand new policy.
Yes.
I
with-
think
with the
that's
administrative
gonna
procedures and the
clarify that,
guidelines.
because
So then
we've asked this question about scholarships more than
Mhm.
once, and I think I agree that it kind of,
So it'll say letter jackets and letter awards.
The
The new one,
New policy would do that.
JNA.
mhm.
Does that feel, it makes sense. It makes more sense to keep them separate if we want to continue to keep scholarships in there.
I
Mrs. Burton?
I think if we're gonna break out anything, we just simply break out scholarships. I mean, frankly, I'm fine with leaving scholarships in there. As long as, if it's in the title, we have at least one sentence of content. Even if it's something as simple as saying scholarship, athletic scholarships will still be recognized at honors night, or as the
Right.
school see fits. I don't care what it says really, but if it's in the title, I do think we need to have something, even a sentence of content. I'm also okay I'm okay with it staying together. If we're going to break it apart, scholarships should be the part broken out, because letter jackets and letter awards really need to, we've done just,
So if we break it apart, then the original JN policy can be amended to say just scholarships.
No, she's saying do letter
Yeah.
jackets and letter awards as JN, as like the main policy, and then A is scholarships. Is that what you're saying,
Either way.
JNA?
Can,
Mrs.
Either way.
Oquist?
I'm going to suggest that we just add a line that references scholarships.
Okay.
I think we've
Yep.
worked on this policy for several months. We
Yep.
would really like it to go forward
Yes.
on Monday so that we can get this
Mhm.
process going. We'll need May and June. Otherwise, we generally don't have a voting meeting in
Yep.
July. So I'd like if we could get this approved and Mr. Etu can start this process
Mhm.
with different clubs to be
Yep.
considered.
Folks are
So
anxiously
if-
waiting.
Yeah, I think the simplest thing would be to simply add a line that we can work on that references scholarships as a method of recognition. And if that's okay with you, rather than
Yep.
have to wait and then bring this forward through the June
Right.
meeting process.
Yes.
Does that sound okay?
Yes, that's
Okay.
perfect. Ms. Acosta?
and I was gonna say something along those lines. In that first line where it says, "It shall be the policy of the school district to give appropriate recognition to pupils," that's where we have an opportunity to say via letter, awards, or scholarship, or
Yeah.
whatever. And
In
throw,
that.
I think you could throw it in there, how they're being recognized, and I think that was the intent of this policy.
Okay. Any
Does
other
that make
questions
sense,
about that one,
Mr.
Mrs.
Etu?
Burton?
It does. I'm just looking at the last part of that sentence where it highlights what areas that would be recognized.
And that's fine, it just doesn't say
Scholarship.
how, right? So it's,
Mrs. Burton?
I have no problem with you guys working on a sentence and coming back to us the next meeting, and
Great.
that's why
And
we have
voting on
first,
it.
study session, committee of the whole, first reading, second reading, so that we can tweak along the way. In the very first line, I don't remember us referring to our students as pupils very often anymore. Should we change that to students, or do we have pupils in policy and I'm just not thinking about it? I'm not recognizing it.
We do have it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with putting
Either way.
students in.
I think students would be better.
I think that's more commonly used.
It's more current language. If we're updating it, it's a good time to change that word.
Anything else? Mrs. Bradford?
Sorry, I guess my question is, like, at the end of the policy, are we going to put, like, see how you have letter jackets, letter awards, and then underneath you would do scholarships, and then put it, okay, perfect. That's, I just wanted to clarify, because that we weren't just gonna put it up in that top
No, I'll be
sentence.
consistent with how it's laid out in the actual title of the board
Yep.
policy.
Awesome, okay, thanks.
Mrs. Burton?
And just one more thing, just a huge thank you to you, the principals, the athletic directors, the cabinet team, the athletic council, and I'm probably missing some folks, who spent literally days and weeks and months working on this. It's important to go back and look at our procedures periodically and what served us well for many years. The current requests, while they couldn't be recognized just as a standalone request, but it did give us the opportunity to go back and take a look at and see how our current system serves us well today. It didn't mean it didn't serve us well for many years, because it absolutely did. But like a lot of other policies and procedures, we need to update them every now and then. But this did take an inordinate amount of time. It was important because it's important to our students, but it's also really important that we get it right. Because Livonia Public Schools absolutely does not make decisions on an arbitrary basis. We can't just make hodgepodge decisions for one group and not have those decisions consistent for another group. So the requests that came forward, and as important as they are, really could not be made in a vacuum. Those decisions could not have been made in a vacuum. And it really caused us to take a very deep dive and make sure that what decisions we make for the requests for letter jackets are going to be not only appropriate for the group that was coming forth and asking for those, but also fair and consistent for the 13,500 kids that we have, because we can't make different decisions for different groups of people arbitrarily. So it took a lot of time and a lot of effort on the part of a lot of people. And we happen to be the last 7 to vote on it, but there are dozens of people that came before us, before these policies come to our desk for a final vote. So thank you to you and to the entire team. I know you were leading this entire endeavor, and it was huge. Thank you to our students, our student athletes and their families for being patient while we really pretty quickly moved through this process. When you think about how fast it happened over a matter of just a few months, once we really got digging into this and into the depths of it. But it's a very significant move. It's a very significant change for how we are dealing with some of our club athletics and varsity letters and so forth. Again, thank you, because I believe it's very important, but it's as important as it was to make decisions on this, it was equally important to make sure we got it right. And I commend you, because when the first requests came forward, I didn't see how there was going to be a way through this that was going to satisfy everybody involved. And I really think that this is an excellent policy that we can all be very proud of. But the board is not the group to be thanked for this. The board just has the privilege of voting on it. You and the entire team of dozens of people are the ones that we need to thank for putting this all together.
No,
So
I
thank you.
appreciate that, and recognizing all those that did put effort into this, and we do appreciate your support as well. We know it's been a lengthy process, but quite honestly, at the end of the day, it's been a wonderful reflection on where we are and where we want to go as a district. And so we look forward to that next step for us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions on the board policy? Okay, we'll put that on for first reading next week. Awesome. Felt like that was a long journey that we got here. We are getting, we're not, first reading, that's a big move.
We're at the first reading.
Yes. Okay. Letter E, personnel, GAHB, staff and student relations. Mr. Abate and Mrs. Keats are coming up to help us with this one. Hello, team.
Good evening, everyone. we are bringing forth two brand-new policies for your review this evening. The first one is staff-student relations. It is a policy that nothing in the personnel portion of the board policy manual referenced relationships between staff and students outside of school hours. So with more and more things like tutoring, coaching, just more opportunities for our staff and students to see each other outside of school hours, we wanted to put something in writing about what is appropriate between a staff member and a student and what is expected when you were employed by LPS.
Yeah, and so we did a little research and districts, practices in surrounding districts and so forth. We pulled together pieces of that and came up with this product, which we then vetted with our team at Miller Johnson, our attorneys, to be certain that everything looked good from in a legal sense, and that all bases were covered that we felt needed to be covered, and they were very comfortable with what we had drafted here. And then we did a little tweaking based on our last meeting to the transportation piece at the bottom there in E. Again, we're attempting to reference here any sort of transportation that would be outside of the boundaries of school function, right? We're not trying to accidentally get caught up on the idea that somebody might have gotten forgotten at school or so forth and might need to get a ride home, which we occasionally will do for a kid with parent and administrator permission. That's not what we're talking about. We're specifically referencing any sort of travel that might occur that's not connected to for school purposes. Everything else is unchanged based on our last meeting, and we think it really covers the range of what needs covering.
Yeah, it is a well thought out and well worded policy, I think, on a lot of levels. So thank you for doing that. Mrs. Burton.
Thank you for the verbiage on E, on transportation. I know I was one that was really requesting that strongly, and what you have come up with does a very nice job of taking care of the intent of what we talked about in great detail at the study session. It's not easy to write these. But thank you very much. I think what you have written captures completely exactly what we were shooting for, so, and what I was requesting. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I'm glad it worked out.
Bonnefield.
I love this policy. I think when we started our conversation, we said some of this may be common sense, but I think having a policy states it very clearly, sets expectations, takes away some of those gray areas, and then if we do have an incident, we have some teeth to be able to have appropriate reactions, and everybody's on the same page, knows what's expected, and knows what is going to, what the outcome will be. So I like the policy. I'm very glad that we had.
Great. That was our hope and expectation going forward.
Anything else? Okay, first reading, Mrs. Acosta. Okay, keep going down the page. F, GAHC Digital Communications.
Yes, this is another brand-new policy we are bringing forth for your review this evening. This is something that we have been talking about since we began working together, and it is something that is very overdue with the world that we live in with digital communications, including social media and all the outlets that exist out there. So we wanted to put something formally in place that outlines expectations for staff while they are staff members, as well as when they are private citizens in the community as well. They are still reflections of LPS, and we want people to carry themselves as such.
Yes, and then this one, we were very fortunate. Again, our friends at Miller Johnson provided the bulk of this to us as a framework at no charge, because they are putting this out there to many of their client districts, as it's pretty essential these days for folks. And so they did offer that to us. And so the public use piece is all purely Miller Johnson. The addition that we put in, and I know we had some conversation in our last meeting. We've been tweaking. Is in the personal use category, and the notion here, the personal use piece is written somewhat briefly. because we recognize and of course fully respect that people have First Amendment rights, and there's only so much that we would even be interested in wading into in a situation like this. Minimally though, however, the employees of the district, all the way across the district, need to understand that their public behavior, particularly the comments that might be made where other students and community members would witness it, should be professional. And minimally, we will have a conversation in HR about those standards. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a disciplinary situation, but a reminder of how we want to conduct ourselves and the image that we want to put forth for our community. So we wanted that to be very clear. And I know that we wanted to put some commentary in there just to remind folks about perceptions out in the community and reflections on reputation and that sort of thing. Don't know if we exactly hit the mark there. The blue line is the one that we put in, and we're still been, kind of wordsmithing that. So maybe you guys can look that over and we can tweak further. But and additionally, that first line, the very first red line, that came from our conversation. Remember, we were going to add a sentence to the front. Sounded like folks liked that one, so we chose that, put it there. Then we put that extra blue piece in the middle. Everything else is unchanged from the last time we saw it.
Comments or questions? Yeah, Mrs. Bradford.
I like the blue sentence that you put in.
Yeah.
I thought that captures really how staff members should be cognizant of how their communications and what they write is perceived. So I like how you wrote that. I think it's good.
Thank you.
I agree. Anything else? No? Okay, we'll put that on for first reading for next week. Thank you for your efforts. That's a great, both of those are
These
very,
both
very
really
needed.
good policies,
Yes,
so
yes.
thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
Yes, oh, that's okay. Yes, go ahead. Absolutely.
Sure.
And maybe this is captured in there, and I'm not reading it that way. Oh, sorry. You know how sometimes you say, don't point out a problem unless there's a resolution, is in the back of my head is there, and maybe the policy isn't the right place to put it, and maybe there's some procedures, but it just, I guess for me, is usually when people lash out on social media, it's because they have an issue and it's not been addressed. And I don't know if there's any way to, and like I said, maybe it doesn't belong in the policy, but just to remind people, if you have an issue, right, go to your administration, go to the person that you need to get a resolution, because tossing negative stuff out on public social media isn't going to get you a resolution. And just somehow encouraging people, if you have a problem, talk, right, try to get, because we can't resolve every problem, but a lot of this stuff, we were reading some social media posts on our way back during the MASB, and the basis of it was that it was people were putting misinformation out there, that and had someone contacted the right people or talked to someone, instead of just tossing it out there on social media, that it would have resolved the issue. And I don't and the other thing is it's permanent. You can't take it back. Right, once it's out there, you can't take it back. And I don't know if that's part of the policy, but I think those are really two really important things when we're talking about this stuff, is why are people posting it out there, right? Talk to someone that you can get a resolution on, right? Try and find out, and then don't forget that it's out there forever.
Sure. I mean, those would be, obviously, those would be things we would have a conversation with somebody about if we were in the situation that we need to talk with somebody.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right that that's the genesis of a lot of people's comments on the internet. There's something that's been unresolved for them. Unfortunately, the knee-jerk in society these days is to just blast out your unrest out into the world and for people to hear and kind of vent it that way. It's not ideal, to put it lightly. I think it's great the community hears you phrase it that way. It feels a little weedy for the policy on my initial feeling. I don't know how other people feel, but that is definitely I mean, that is the message we want out there. There are many people in this room here, many people across the district who are here to address the things that kind of stick in people's craw. If there's something out there or something that somebody's concerned with, we're all here to help. But putting something on the internet that could potentially be, damaging to somebody in the district is not the right way to go. I wouldn't know how to
No,
put that in though.
that's fine.
Yeah, I agree with your statement. And if they are a staff member and something is disparaging, we can pull them in and remind them of all of those things. And, Stacy Jenkins does a beautiful job in our communications department of, making sure messages out there are accurate and redirecting people when they are not. It's a 24/7 job that will never be perfect, but, she does a great job of doing so.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anything else for that policy? No. Okay, thank you very much. Now, really, thank you. Board policy, students, JGFG, accidents and illness. Mr. Green, thank you for helping us with this policy, sir.
Well, this is nice. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me back. Does everybody have their copy on their? Great, I'll refer to the hard copy. Last week, we talked about Juno Golf, or Juliet Golf, JGJFG, student accidents and illnesses. Boy, Mr. Willenberg would have been so disappointed how bad I messed up. I'm going to have to text him this evening and let him know I really messed up. Yes, he'll have some consequences for me for that. So when we spoke last week, just to build the big picture, we talked about the overall policy, which was quite brief in the past. All students shall have an emergency card on file in the office. We talked about some various changes, and we settled on all students shall have updated emergency care information in the district student information system. MyStar, parents, guardians are also responsible to update the school throughout the year if emergency contact and or care information changes. So that, what I heard last week was really having both of those pieces in there, and that would be our policy change. And then, obviously, it's not something you would need to vote on, but administrative procedures would be updated as well, and you can see those changes. And the big highlights for the change that we took the word "our" and changed that to the districts in several spots. And we also crossed off in the second paragraph under number 1 for emergency purposes. School offices should print a copy, and we talked about the reason for printing those copies from MyStar of the students' demographic information. And the other piece that was important is to just indicate that in our admin procedures, the student injury report, that those are now through our K-12 informed forms, which is a digital form now. And then on the last page, we spoke about a few things, the changes that we're going to hold on to those files based on the Michigan Retention's record and disposal schedule for Michigan Public Schools, fixed a capitalization error there. And we talked about notification at the grade level. And we also, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, on number 5, we also have admin procedures for communicable diseases. So this is a little bit of a redundancy here, but it's fine being here as well about the exposure letter. And then number 6, the big change there was just that we wanted to be clear with our families that we expect if their child's well enough to be in school, they're well enough to participate in the extended programming that happens during the day, especially at the elementary recess, PE class, and that if they were going to request for a longer period of time than 3 days, we would want physician's authorization. So those are the admin procedures and the policy. It's just really in base, just trying to update it to reflect our more digital way of keeping student demographic and family demographic information.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Any comments or questions about it, about that policy? I do have one. Actually, 2. Only in the, sorry, did you already put it away, Mr. Green? Okay. Just when it says all students shall have an emergency card, and then it says parents and guardians are also responsible. Like, it doesn't say parents and guardians are responsible for anything in the first paragraph, and then it says they're also responsible for the, you know what, it just seems like it should say parents and guardians are responsible to have an updated emergency, they're also or take the also out.
I think the reason why that wasn't in the first part is the first sentence is really our obligation as a school district. Like, so we have to keep demographic information in our student information system when we need that information. So we're basically making a statement that says we will have updated emergency care information in our student information system. I think the second sentence from last week was basically just to really reinforce that we also expect our parents and guardians to update that throughout the school year, so it's not just a stagnant piece of information. Things change. We know now with the digital age, with emails, cell phones,
Right.
it used to be you'd have a home phone number and be your home phone number for 50 years. Sometimes cell phone numbers change
Right.
and email addresses. So I
Right.
think that's the difference there that
I
would.
get it. I
yeah.
totally think that it should be separated. I'm just wondering about the wording. Like, do you take the also out because parent, or in addition,
Oh, I
parents?
see what you're saying.
Do you know what I'm
Just
saying? I'm
remove-
just,
Also, yeah, I see, I
that's just
agree,
my,
yep.
it's
We'll
just that you're
fix
not
that up.
saying. Okay, perfect.
Oh, I
And-
see, yeah.
Yes, I hear what you're saying.
Are responsible, not
Mhm.
also.
Right, right, right.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mrs. Bradford.
Very nice
Thank
job.
you so much. Thank
Proud of
you.
you, Mrs. Frank.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, team. Mr. Johnson, you're proud of me too? The other one is, we did talk about printing out a
Yep.
copy, and we
On the
talked.
First, number one there?
Yes,
Mhm.
we talked about we talked about this, and we just said you could land wherever you want, but we talked about printing it out and putting it in a classroom or putting it in with the emergency, yes.
Yeah, we really
Or
wanted to.
you don't want to be
we
that
wanted to keep it a
detailed?
little more general. We talked
Okay.
about this as these admin procedures are guidance procedures. We do know there's exceptions and there sometimes is more than just in one area, so we
Yeah.
wanted to keep it pretty general. Mr. Etu and myself, when we review our safety protocols with the administrators at the beginning of the year and throughout the year, we do go over this. So, it could be that they keep them in the go bag. It could be that they keep them in the recess area for field trips. So they're more than one spot.
Okay.
So, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Mrs. Bonnefield.
In this digital age, it's, having a printed out copy and we never know what's gonna happen when we need it. Is it really clear to staff, and if they have a walkie-talkie, like in the Wi-Fi goes down at school, that there's somebody here that they can buzz into and get into MyStar to get emergency information, or if we have a school, kind of what is the if something happens and we don't have the hard copies with us, what are our procedures now? I know when we used to have the pink cards, that was it, right? When our kids were little. But how does that work, that we can be sure that our students are getting the medical care
Yeah.
or the emergency phone numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have those archived, first of all, but then we also have many folks here at central office that can access those records at any time, myself included. One of the reasons why I think it's actually a better world that we live in now is when we used to just have the hard copies, that was it. Now we have the hard copies, which could be outdated information if you printed them in September and you didn't reprint them since then. But then having the digital access as well as also the app we talked about last week. Many folks have it on their phone, the MyStar app, where you can get into that. And we also have back-end ways through our IT department we can access that information as well. So I feel confident with our student information specialists, our directors, and our secretarial staff here. We have just a variety of ways we can access that information.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
No other questions? We'll add that to first reading as well. And that concludes the policy committee. Thank you, President Bradford.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Moving on to item 7, Personnel Committee. Mr. Johnson.
I do not believe we have anything for Personnel Committee this evening.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 8, Legislative Committee. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Bradford. We have no items before the Legislative Committee tonight.
The
Wonderful.
only thing I'll mention on
Oh.
that is on
whoops.
Tuesday, the 21st of next week.
Okay.
I will be up in Lansing, that is Tuesday, for the day, as on our K-12 Alliance Legislative Action Day. So a number of superintendents from across the region will be up in Lansing. We will be meeting with our individual legislators. We will also be hearing directly from Governor Whitmer, and members of MyLeap, which is the new offshoot of the MDE. And so that will be an important day as the legislature and the governor are working to reconcile the 3 recommendations for the budget for the coming year. We think it is really important that we have a presence and have our voices heard. So there are a number of superintendents who will be in Lansing for that day.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Quist. And with that, if there's no other business for this evening, we are adjourned. Thank you and have a good evening.